All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. If you're anything like me, you have been consuming a lot of UFC 285 media. I could not be more excited. Just one more sleep, everybody, one more sleep. And I've got some takeaways from the press conference, some things that were said, the face-offs, that kind of stuff, and also our first look at Jon Jones's new heavyweight physique that we have been waiting 3 years to see. Okay, so perhaps a little underwhelming to some, but I want to touch on it a little bit because I've got a take that I haven't really heard from a whole lot of people. So we're going to talk about all that, but before we do, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll thank you in advance for your subscription. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And I know that you're going to do it because you're not going to be the kind of person that doesn't do the thing that they've already been thanked for, right? Who would do that? Now, anyways, let's get into it. Okay, so first things first. What everybody's talking about is Jon Jones's heavyweight physique. And I think that because of the time that it took for him to build this physique, a lot of people were expecting something else. Now, with that being said, when I first saw it, I went, who are any of us to really criticize a professional athlete's physique? And also, a lot of the times, the most muscled up guy isn't necessarily the most impressive fighter. I mean, Paulo Costa, for example, dudes can look phenomenal, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with their fighting capabilities. Now, and then I thought, well, no, this is kind of all part of it. And also, we waited 3 years for this. So, it's not so much as being critical, but it's kind of like, huh, really? So, there's a thing, Jon Jones has been gaining muscle for 3 years to try to bulk up to heavyweight now. You cannot necessarily, if you were somebody who is a very well put together, in shape athlete, and you were trying to add a bunch of muscle, it would be almost impossible to add mass without adding fat along with that muscle. And you with bodybuilders and stuff like this, right? They'll go through bulking phases, and then they'll go through cutting phases, and then once they cut the weight is when you really see the gains that they've made, because they shed all the fat that they added on with the extra muscle. And I thought at first that that's probably the case here with Jon Jones, that he went through a big bulking phase, and because he is not going to be on stage trying to show off his new muscles, he's going to be in a fight. Him and his team probably realized, well, why would we shed weight when you're going to be fighting big guys? There's no need. We don't need to showcase your muscle. We want it to be functional. And an extra 15, 20 pounds of fat might actually do you some good in certain situations, at heavyweight especially, right? Now, the only problem that I see with that is, or I thought about that, right? And then I thought, but there's also this one thing, because in the press conference when they were talking about, they were asking Jon, oh, Cyril says, you're brand new to heavyweight. And Jon almost took offense to it. And he, I've been going with big boys my whole life. My brothers are both really big boys and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, and when I fought at light heavyweight, I used to walk around at 235. And that made me really think, because I thought, okay, because they asked him about how much he thought he would weigh. And he said that he had gotten a little heavier, but he didn't feel very good. He felt bloated and lethargic and stuff like that, so he cut a little bit of weight. And I don't mean a weight cut. I mean he had gained more weight. He decided he was going to lose a little bit, so to find a happy medium, a balance, I guess, right? Now, he said that he would probably be at about 250 to 255 range. And then when he fought at light heavyweight, he was 235 walk around weight. So before fight week and before the weight cut and all that, he was 235. Now, I would argue that on his brand new physique that we see here, if he were to shed all the weight, all the extra fat, to show us his muscles, I think he would probably weigh exactly what he did walking around at light heavyweight. I would argue that you can see visibly probably at least, 15, 20 pounds of fat on his body that was not there previously when he was fighting at light heavyweight. He's got decent sized gut going on, right? Nothing like Derek Lewis or anything like that, but it's there. and you can't really see his abs anymore, which if you look in the thumbnail at the picture of him at 205 when he is allegedly walking around at 235 pounds, they're there clear as day. Okay. He's also got a little bit of weight, a little bit of extra fat going around in the chest and the shoulder area. All the areas, actually, that look bigger than before, right? Which would make sense. Now, I think that that's the one thing that I can't stop thinking about is you took 3 years to put on this mass in the right way, right? Or so he says. And if you were to just shed the fat, the extra fat that you've put on since you've began this bulk, I think you would look the exact same, or at the very least, you would weigh the exact same. Because the thing is, before, he didn't have he didn't have much weight to cut or fat that he could have gotten rid of when he was fighting at 205, but weighed 235 pounds. His body fat percentage, I don't know what it would be, but I would imagine quite low. He was shredded. So, it's mind-blowing to me that we waited this long, and I understand that to put on like even 5 pounds of pure muscle can take like a year, and you've got to do everything right and this and that, but man, I think that the way that it was hyped up, like we were expecting a lot more. He honestly looks like almost every other heavyweight, which is fine. I guess he's going to be fighting other heavyweights, but it's just, I can't get that out of my head that you did weigh 235 pounds. Okay. You took 3 years to put on 20 pounds. And then I was thinking to myself, no, I don't think he's as fat as people think he is. I think if we shed off the extra fat, we would see his gains. But I think if he shed off the extra fat, he would weigh exactly what the fuck he weighed when he was fighting at 205 pounds. Which means, what did you really do? Like I don't know. It's a strange one, man. And, again, like I said, I know that, like, what he said is correct. This is not a bodybuilding competition. But to me, it looks like you put on, let's be kind and say you put on 5 pounds of pure muscle. Because there's no way that you can't look at his body and say that there is easily 15 pounds of visible fat that he could shed off. And again, the extra weight's probably functional. Like, what's the point in us going and shedding off that weight just so that we can look better in the octagon and then actually be at a disadvantage maybe in some areas because we're, now 20 pounds lighter than who we're going to be fighting against. But then what was all that time for? You know what I mean? Why didn't you just stick at 235? I don't know. It's a weird one, man. And he, I can't get it out of my head. And I don't want to be one of these guys that's like harping on his body and because I don't think that that's really like indicative of whether or not he will win or lose. But it just doesn't look like a physique that took 3 years to build. So maybe, just maybe, now, maybe he's actually a natural light heavyweight, and this whole time we've been like, man, it's a weird one, because when you watch him fight guys at light heavyweight, especially guys like, I know Daniel Cormier's got a lot of fat that he could shed, and he could probably be a fucking welterweight if he was disciplined enough. But even Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes was his peer in terms of size. Alexander Gustafsson was his peer in terms of size. But a lot of other guys like Vitor Belfort, Rashad Evans, a lot of these guys that he used to fight against, I think, were actually natural middleweights, and that's why he looked so much larger than he did. When he was fighting them, right? And then I think because of the size differential between him and his opponents, we all thought, no, he's a natural heavyweight and he's just cutting weight. Now, walking around at 235, you kind of are a natural heavyweight. You want to cut 30 pounds? Like, that's kind of crazy. And a lot of those guys that he did beat, actually, they did at one point in their career, whether it was after or before, fought at middleweight. So perhaps it's more that the guys at 205 are like slightly undersized and he was way oversized. Because seeing his frame and his physique and how long it took him to get there would kind of make me think that he's not a natural heavyweight, because he absolutely has extra fat that he could shed. Like, I would be curious. I'm really curious to find out his weight today. And it doesn't really matter, but there were a few other contradictions, or at least one other contradiction that I noticed during the press conference. So one, he has a weird energy about him, man. He has a really weird energy about him, especially this time around. I've noticed it before, but this time it seems to be really coming out. Like, you know what it is, man. He's too fat. No, I'm just kidding. But Joe Biden, you know how Joe Biden will start a speech, and he'll be like, "Oh wow, he's here," and he can do well, and then you get 10 minutes in to the interview, and he starts like, and doing that kind of shit. Like his Adderall's wearing off or whatever. I think that Jon Jones is kind of having like a similar thing. Not that he's taking Adderall necessarily, but he keeps showing up to these events like media day, press conference, and things of that nature with the extreme high energy, being overly kind and nice and sweet to everybody and shit like that. And then about 5 minutes in, he's like, all, yeah. Yeah. And it was funny too, because Mike Bone took a shot and asked him another question at the press conference, and I thought, fuck me, you got balls, guy, after asking him the question about Vegas. And as soon as he was even answering the question, he looked over at Dana and started talking to him, and I wish that I could read lips, man, but I couldn't. I would imagine it was something like, do I have to answer this question from this guy because he asked me this question, me, being a little bitch about it. But he answered it, in fairness, very, very shortly, mind you, but that's okay. But yeah, it's like he has this really high intense energy for like 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's gone. And people that are being super critical of physique might be like, yeah, dude, he's lethargic because he's fat. Okay? Because I know that BMI doesn't tell the whole story, and he's a tall guy to begin with, so he has a big frame. So perhaps his BMI won't say that he's like, close to obesity. But I would be very curious to find out what his body fat percentage is. And I mean, we're not ever going to know that. Maybe if somebody's watching that can judge that kind of thing just by looking at somebody, or a rough estimate by looking at somebody, put it in the comments below. I'd be very curious to find that out. One other thing that he did. So, the narrative that he never trained, right? That narrative goes around, and it's very convenient that it only ever... They only ever bring that up after lackluster performances or close fights. And I don't like calling them lackluster performances, because I don't think it's that he had a lackluster performance. I think it's that his opponents had very good performances, and perhaps he's not as unbeatable as he appears, right? Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones, point blank, period, get fucked. Dana White saying that his record should be 26 or 27-0 or whatever it is. No, the bullshit loss to Matt Hamill, it's karma. Cancels out for the Dominic Reyes fight. They knew, the Cosmic Energy knew back then he was going to get a fucking robbery decision given to him. So they gave him a loss, okay? It is what it is. No, but in all seriousness, like, I don't like calling them lackluster performances. I think it's just that his opponents had really good performances, right? Alexander Gustafsson, that was a great fight. And then, of course, the narrative was, well, I barely even trained for it. I was doing cocaine like a week prior. Well, okay, dude. And then we don't hear about that again until, like, his other lackluster performances. And it's like, well, okay, dude. And then, it's, oh, he wasn't motivated or he was bored. Like Dan Hardy, you fucking muppet. Dude, I used to love Dan Hardy's shit. I cannot stand listening to him now. He is so bad. His fucking takes are so bad. Like, I don't get it. But either way, Jon Jones said, the difference about me now and me then, which I swear, this is sounding all very familiar. I'm pretty sure I've heard it before. From Jon Jones himself, coming out of his mouth every fucking time he comes back, but that's okay. He says, the difference is that you know, um, I really learned the value of just showing up. I had training partners that were holding me accountable. So I learned that a lot of you just got to show up. You just got to be there. And I used to not take training as seriously before, and I would not really train until I had a fight, or, sometimes even a couple weeks before the fight, and this and that and whatever. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Same shit that we hear all the fucking time from you, okay? And then he gets asked another question, and I think it was the big dark Canadian guy. He's a big fat boy. He had a oddly shaped head. He said, he was asked, why do you think that you have been able to stay successful for so long when others haven't, or something along those lines? And he said that the reason why he's been dominant for so long is because of his work ethic, and that he's in the gym every day. Blood, sweat, and tears, all this shit. I work harder than anybody, all this stuff. Which one is it, John? I can't understand how people, like, his fans don't realize him saying this shit, and they're like, wait, what? I've been telling all my friends that you used to not even train, and now you're telling me the only reason you're successful is because you train every fucking day? Get fucked. I hate it, man. Just be honest with everybody and yourself, okay? Dominic Reyes beat you, okay? They keep bringing up that fight, man. His performance against Dominic Reyes. He fucking lost. And I also don't like the argument, like Luke Thomas was saying this the other day. And I like a lot of what Luke Thomas says in regards to fights, not anything else. But in regards to fighting, he's not an idiot. And he says shit like, Jon Jones beat the living shit out of him in round 5. The strike differential between round 1 for Dominic Reyes was larger than the strike differential between Jon Jones and Dom Reyes in round 5. So, arguably, or not arguably, Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones more handedly in round 1 than Jon Jones beat him in round 5. So why is the narrative like Jon beat the shit out of him, but not the same for Dominic Reyes? And I know that immediately after the fight, Luke scored the fight for Dom Reyes. He's kind of like walked that back, it seems. He hasn't even brought it up this time around. And I find it strange that even Dan Hardy, dude. Dan Hardy, same thing. He said that Dominic Reyes didn't beat him. I don't think so. I didn't think so. Well, like, it's pretty clear, dude. It's pretty clear. I don't understand, especially the one judge having it 4-1. It's just fucked. But I'm going off on a tangent again about that because it does really bug me that they just play it off like as if he's never had adversity or a controversy. And I don't mean one outside of the cage. I mean one in the cage. Like, you got a decision that you should not have gotten, and it was your last time out. And you say that you don't train, and then say the only reason why you're so successful is because you fucking train every day, blood, sweat, and tears. And for those of you that are saying, well, maybe he's talking about now, and no, he's not. Because the context of the question was, why have you been able to remain so dominant from the time you were 23 years old till now? And that was his answer. So you gotta pick one, John. You gotta pick one. There are some times when you can say something that sounds somewhat contradictory and both things can be true. This cannot. You cannot say that you do not train until weeks before a fight or whatever, and then also say the only reason why you're extremely dominant is because you train every day, blood, sweat, and tears, all this shit. Okay, it's fucking annoying. I wish he would shut the fuck up about God, okay? Because at least when, like, oh man, at least when certain dudes talk about it, you know that, like, they actually have Christian values and shit. I can't believe his fiance's there with him too, which is crazy, and I can't believe he brought it up. He brought it up. Okay, crazy. Now, this has been 19 minutes of me hating on Jon Jones, which I'll stop doing. I really do think that the physique thing is a legitimate question, though. At first, I thought people were just and unironically body shaming, which I don't give a fuck about, but I was kind of like, this isn't important. Like, you know what I mean? Besides Francis Ngannou, like, who's a super fucking muscled up champ that we have right now, you know? But the fact that he's put on about 20 pounds, right? And that the argument, well, if he sheds that weight, you'll be able to see his gains. Well, if he sheds that weight, he's going to weigh what he weighed before. So what gains were made? If somebody thinks I'm fucking this up, tell me in the comments below. I'm not sure. I'm not like a bodybuilding expert or anything, but just logic and basic math. You're like, well, if you weighed this much then and that much now, I mean, and you've got this much fat, then you weigh the same, right? You just got a little bit of extra fat on you. And then the other storyline that's coming out is Cyril Gahn's hand. Now, he was asked about it, and I'm glad that a media member did actually ask him about it. He says that it's fine, perfectly good. He went like this, all that, you know. He said it's perfectly fine, no issues, whatever. They had a doctor come and look at it. Because technically, I know a lot of guys do break their hands in the octagon, but if you've ever heard Mark Smith talk about this, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast a long time ago, and he said that if there's a break, break or dislocation, they're immediately supposed to stop the fight, right? So, and that includes hand. Joe asked him about that, but the thing is that you can hide a broken hand, and they won't really know unless they, cut the wraps, take the glove off, all this shit. But so if they found out that you had a broken hand going in, they might not let you fight. Now, Cyril Gahn's hand is a fucking balloon. His hand's a fucking balloon. I've never seen anything like it. It's huge. He's got a big bump, like, right here, which could just be scar tissue, but I've got a lot of scar tissue on my knuckles. I don't have no bumps like that. I've got a big swollen knuckle that's, like, permanently swollen, but it's nothing like his. His hand looked fucking weird. Like, it looked inflated, unironically a balloon. But he says it's fine, so I'm hoping that he's not bullshitting and he's just trying to hide that. I think Cyril Gahn handled himself very well at the press conference. He, took the booze okay. He seemed very composed. He answered questions in respectful but confident ways, and, it is what it is. And then the face-offs, dude. The face-offs were pretty interesting because Jon Jones just looks like a normal guy now, and it's really strange to see that. And I don't mean that he looks like... I mean, when you would see him face off against all of his competition at light heavyweight, you were like, oh my god, like, that's fucking Jon Jones. And Joe Rogan always would say this thing that at the time I totally agreed with, but now I think there's a little bit more of a nuance, there's more nuance to the situation, okay? He used to say Jon Jones has the perfect body type for fighting. Which at the time, and if you'd watch him fight, there's like almost no argument because he was so good with his range. He's got long legs, long arms, so he can keep you at range with his eye pokes, which is unfortunate. But, and then the leverage he can get off of chokes and punches because of his long arms, the long legs when other guys are trying to take him down, everything about him and his body type was perfect for fighting. I think what the correct take now is that he had the perfect body type for fighting at light heavyweight against light heavyweights. And I mean, I guess that's to be determined, but not really, because him and Cyril Gahn look almost identical. Almost identical. So his body type is not going to be so much of it's not going to be an advantage anymore. And I'll tell you what, towards the end of his career, he started not being able to capitalize on his reach advantage as much as he did in the earlier parts of his career. Now, he still would deliberately try to eye poke Dominic Reyes multiple times in their fight, and it's obvious and annoying. And every time I watch that fight back and watch it in slow motion for certain spots, he's going like that, man. It's fucking obvious. But regardless, this is the smallest reach advantage he will have had over any opponent. This opponent, I would argue, can close distance way better than any opponent he's ever fought. And, a lot of Jon's highlights are him landing crazy, crazy shit. But if you actually watch and pay attention to his striking, he is not a combination thrower. He throws single digits, essentially. Sometimes he'll double it up. But he's a plot. He plots forward and he finds an opening. The thing that he does, though, that makes it seem like he's throwing more than one at a time, I guess, He doesn't wait a long time in between throwing the next strike, but it's not in combination. And he'll throw a lot of different techniques. Like, he'll throw a right hand, and then he'll throw a leg kick, and then he'll throw an oblique kick, and then a teep kick, and then they're all over the place. But he's not, like, man, I know that I've been going back and rewatching all of his fights. I think that his best performance was Alexander Gustafsson. The second time, Alexander Gustafsson could not get going in that fight whatsoever. Everything he tried, all he was doing was feinting. Anytime he went to get going, though, Jon would make him reset with a kick, with a feint, with a whatever. Grabbed him, circle out, all the shit. Like, it was really good. And Jon was throwing a lot of fucking strikes at him. And I think by the end of that fight, the reason why it was finished, Gus's leg was fucked from Jon kicking it and checking kicks and stuff like that. And then, I honestly think he had just, like, given up. When they went to the ground, he was wincing in pain, trying to elevate Jon with the butterflies. And, Jon, like, just totally dismantled him. But in the DC fight right before that, before the head kick, man, that was a close fight. And I know it doesn't matter because it was a close fight, and I know that Cyril Gane's going to fight in a way different way than Daniel Cormier, but he's also going to fight in a way different way from Alexander Gustafsson. And this comparison that Jon keeps making between Cyril Gane and Thiago Santos could not be further apart. They could not be further apart. Cyril Gane is, it's not debatable. He is a much more polished, a much better striker than Thiago Santos, with all due respect, okay? His shit is clean. He has very good technique. Jon also said something really silly. He goes, he doesn't have good defense. What the fuck, bro? My hair's... He doesn't have good defense. He's got good footwork, and that's all he uses to defend, is his footwork. And I went, Jon, that sounds like good defense to me. Like, I don't know what you're saying there, because that's defense, dude. That's good defense. You want him to stand in the pocket and be, like, trying to block shit when he's fighting against fucking heavyweights? Like, do you not realize that you're about to fight heavyweights, Jon, or what's going on? Because I would argue that being able to get out of the way of a punch without being so far away that you can't counter is a much better way to defend than being in the pocket trying to block punches and fucking shit. Like, what? Also, Jon, you were getting clipped with rear uppercuts by Dominic Reyes on counters. So I don't know. He does have one of the best strike differentials between him and his opponents. I think he does. Best in UFC history. It's almost 2 times. Okay? That's insane. But it's been slipping lately. So him saying Cyril Gane has bad defense is quite strange. When he was the only guy to go 5 rounds with Francis Ngannou, the current current Francis Ngannou, right? I know Stipe did the first time, but to be fair, also Stipe utilized a lot of wrestling in that fight, whereas Francis Ngannou had to resort to wrestling to beat Cyril Gane, because Cyril Gane was fucking piecing him up in the first 2 rounds and didn't get hit. The only guy to stand and trade with Ngannou for fun and didn't get fucking hit. And then Jon said one other thing, and then I'll probably wrap this up, that I thought was strange too. Maybe he's trying to fuck with Cyril, or Cyril Gane. Sorry, maybe he's trying to fuck with Cyril Gane, but it seems like he's reaching for shit. Like, Cyril Gane got asked what the issue was in the Francis Ngannou fight, and he says that he doesn't think it was so much a technique issue. He thinks that there was the fact that he was surprised that Francis Ngannou was going to be that grappling heavy, because he thought that Francis was just going to try and knock him out the entire time, and he was going to be able to do what he did in the first 2 for 5 rounds. So he wasn't preparing for Francis to wrestle. And he said he thinks that it was more a little bit of a strength issue. And I know what he's saying. He's not saying that he is not strong enough to deal with Francis Ngannou's strength. What he is saying is that a lot of those takedowns were not off of proper technique. They were just like Francis fucking He-Man in it. And he's right on a couple of them. And then one of them was his fault when they went to the ground and then never got back up, but that's okay. But I mean, the first takedown that Francis Ngannou landed, which kind of changed the momentum of that fight for a couple rounds, was Francis caught a kick of Cyril Gane's, and then the closest takedown you could call it was like a double leg, but it really wasn't that. Like, he just picked him up and slammed him. Like, it was not a technically executed takedown. It was a strength thing, and I think that that's what he's trying to say, but there's just a bit of a language barrier there, so he can't articulate properly, which is fine, dude. Leave him alone. But John goes, oh, that's really interesting for me to hear that he thinks it was a strength issue, because, there's a lot of guys that say things about me that they're very surprised about how strong I am. And, I just think that Cyril Gane is going to be very surprised with how strong I am as well. And I just fucking thought, like, bro, you just had to pack on 20 pounds of fat to get to a reasonable enough size, in your opinion, to fight at heavyweight. Francis Ngannou is, like, cutting weight with, like, a fucking 4% body fat or some shit. You know what I mean? That guy's shredded. His muscles are huge. I would argue. Now, I could be wrong, because perhaps certain lifts are more about technique and skill than they are about just pure strength. I'm not a huge, like, power lifter or any, like, I don't, you know what I mean? I would argue Francis Ngannou's probably just as, or if not stronger than Jon Jones, but that's just, I don't know. Yeah. That's what I would think, dude. Look at him. But I know looks can be deceiving, and that's why I wouldn't put too much stock into the way Jon's body looks. I was expecting it to be a little more impressive, but, hey, he's got milk, boys. He's got milk. Okay, so, anyways, this video is way longer than I thought it would be. But once I, like, wake up after, like, 10 minutes and I can't stop talking, it's a fucking problem. But I'll see you at the next one, and like and subscribe. I'll thank you in advance. Thank you so much for your subscription. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.